Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Ben. I'm a self-taught web developer who went from zero to full stack paid in under 8 months via the Odin Project. And this is a second part video in the series of what's it like to work in a tech company in Canada. And in this video, I'll be focusing on what it's like working in a smaller tech company. I have a link down below in the description for the first video of what it's like working in a larger tech company as well, if you're interested. Okay, so let's look. Again, I'm going to have some slides here like the first video that's just going to help guide the discussion around what it's like working in a small tech company. So here's the table of contents. Basically, we're going to look at the scope of work, the management styles or management structure, the teams you work on, how projects are managed, your dev environment, the kind of documentation you'll have, your daily workflows, what support is like, and your team building as well. So let's jump into scope of work. So when you're working in a small company, there's going to be fewer developers, fewer staff. Usually people are wearing more hats. So typically you're going to focus on all parts of the application as a developer. So conversely to working in a big company where you are siloed and focusing on one specific area of an application, in a small company, one day you could be working on building front end, the next day you're building back end in one area, say doing authentication, and then the next day you're doing back end to do with e-commerce orders, products, and then you could be working with a payment gateway the other day. And then you could be working in something like Sidekick and looking into memory allocation issues as to why your Sidekick processors are becoming bloated. So you're getting a whole range of exposure to different areas of the application in a smaller company. And you're probably going to be building more new features. Smaller companies are generally going to be growing more. The product may be less evolved or mature. So you're probably more in a state of growth. So lots of new feature building. Also refactoring of code that was kind of put in a rush and now you're making better. And then just making general improvements. It could be things like application performance, for example. You're going to probably help support with bugs. In my case, I actually don't get to work on too many bugs. There's a couple bugs I've fixed, but we have another developer who actually works more full-time on just working in production environment and fixing bugs and working with clients directly. But I do enjoy working on bugs with clients just because you do get to see more real world use cases and you get to apply your development and see change in real time. When you fix a bug and it's helped someone out, that's pretty cool to see as well. And you'll definitely get pulled into side projects or one-off projects or small groups, committees to figure things out. Just because there's fewer people, so more as an individual, you have to do more things and carry more weight and wear more hats generally. So the management style is going to be quite different in a small company. So here, Dave was a manager in a large company in my last video. Well, now Dave left the large company and he's come to a small company. So as a manager, Dave's going to wear many hats. In fact, you know what? Dave could also be the CEO. Dave could also be the CTO. Dave could also be the head of HR. In a small company, Dave is going to be the C of many things. And he's going to be busy, or she's going to be busy. Daveth or Davina, let's say, she's going to be very busy. So you need to work independently. You need to have the ability to, when you're facing a problem, to say, okay, I got this problem. Should I go and bother Davina or Daveth? Maybe not. They're busy. They're in 5 meetings today. Okay, let me try and figure this out. Let me learn from what I understand of how we do things in this company and try and figure this problem myself. Or at least, if I can't figure it out, develop a couple of solutions. Hey, Dave, here's the issue. I think we could do A or B or C. And then Dave will say, you know what, let's do B because of X, Y, Z. Not to throw too many letters out there, but you get what I'm saying here. You've really got to be proactive and think 3 steps ahead and figure out where this might go. So you take the heavy lifting off of your manager. I think that's a really important thing to be able to do in order to excel in a small company. And there's probably going to be fewer systems in place for the manager. So in a large company, you're going to have more, you can have more ingrained and structured things like performance reviews. And in a small company, these things are a lot less formalized. That you just kind of show up, you have a chat, and you get feedback on how things are going, whether you're doing well, what needs to improve. Your performance discussions are different. It's just a lot more informal, a lot more kind of chit chat rather than going into a meeting knowing exactly how it's going to go because it's formalized and you've been through it 3 times before. So yeah, management is very different in a small company. Your teams are also going to be very different. Oh, I cut Cartman off there on myself here. But Cartman is saying there is no I in team, and that certainly is true. But in a small company, it might just be one team. So for example, where I work, it's a team of 10, about 9 staff, 10 if you include the part-time staff as well. We meet every day as the whole team. So in our stand-ups, we have myself, we have 2 other developers, we have the CEO, we have kind of a head of operations, and then we have 2 sales staff. And we all meet and we all discuss what we're doing. So I get to hear about many things that are going on in the company that day, that week, that I otherwise wouldn't hear anything about if I was in a larger company. On the flip side, I'm sometimes hearing about stuff that I don't need to hear about, but there's trade-offs. And for now, I quite enjoy meeting these people every day because we're all part of the same team. You kind of feel a bit more a sense of belonging when you get to meet them every day. And I get the exposure to their work, so I understand more about what is going on in the product and what the value is that we're adding to our clients, and getting a bigger sense of the picture there. So in a small company, your dev team is going to be small. For a while, the first 6 months of where I am at now, I was there were 2 developers. The CEO is also the founder and the original developer, but now he's off doing other things. There's the one developer who's focused mainly on working in production and support. And then it was just myself building new features. I didn't talk to anyone for all of the day. I'd go to that one meeting in the morning for 10 minutes and it would just be me by myself. Very small dev teams. If I had questions, I'd have to ping them to the CEO/original developer, and he was always busy. So, that's kind of where I had to come up with this more autonomous workflow. And what you will find that there will be fewer people holding a lot of knowledge. And there's pros and cons here. In a big company, you have lots of people, but that knowledge is kind of spread out. And it can be harder to find the root source of a piece of knowledge. But in a smaller company, smaller teams, it's all there within 1 or 2 people. And you can access that quickly. Now, there does come a risk where if 1 or 2 of those people leave, then the company can be in a lot of trouble as well. But that's when you need to have systems in place to make sure there's transfer of knowledge, etc., etc. So project management is also going to be quite different in a smaller team. Again, it's going to be less formalized, less structured, at least it is for me. Like I have here, the systems are likely a work in progress. So what was working when there was 1 or 2 developers may no longer work for when there are 3 or 4 developers. And the system may need to be improved, may need to be changed. And that's okay. You just need to remain flexible and adaptable to this change. Not get frustrated by it, but rather, again, bring solutions to the table. So for example, in a small team where I'm at now, we didn't have any documentation, and we didn't have any code review process, and we didn't have any kind of dev sync up. So I've initiated all 3 of those things. Now we have some start of a documentation. The devs meet bi-weekly to discuss these kinds of projects. And we now have a great code reviewing process where we have 2 other developers always reviewing PRs. And it's just way better. And that wasn't there. And that's okay because it's a small company that's growing. And I get to be the person that helps make these changes for the better. And that's a good thing, I think. It's quite satisfying to be able to do that. So the style that I work under is the Kanban style. So basically we just have a Trello board with a list of columns. And there's stuff that needs to be done, stuff that's in progress, stuff that's done or ready for review, and then stuff that's complete. And it's just kind of as needed. The tasks get created by the CEO. And I don't know what I'm working on the following week. I only know what I'm working on the week that I'm working on it, because it's kind of a just-in-time process. And it's worked till now. I've been kept busy. though there are sometimes issues with a bottleneck of code review. Right, for example, the CEO was always reviewing my code, and if he was busy, then I would be left not having my code reviewed. So I'd sometimes have to start another piece of work. And there have been cases where I have 5 or 6 pull requests up at one time. They're all ready for review. And I've grown to accept this and adapt to it. But at first, it was very challenging having to do that, because at Freshworks, we didn't. We had one PR that got reviewed, and this is a large company, Freshworks, that is. One pull request was made, it got reviewed, and then once it's merged, you start the next piece of work. Okay, where I'm at now, that isn't the case. You're going to have multiple PRs up at once. And context switching, right? This can be the challenge. Is you've been working on the last 2 weeks on 2 areas of the application, and then you also get a review on something you did 3-4 weeks ago. Now you got to make some changes, and you have to think about, oh man, I got to get my head back into that space, or it was 3-4 weeks ago, to even figure out what I was doing here, and that's tough. But it's a small growing pain, I think, in a company, and implementing processes that help alleviate this, like having a new pull request review process, really helps to solve these issues. I've covered everything there. The only thing also is that under the Agile framework, you generally have more organized meetings, like kind of kickoff and sprint ending meetings. But in my case, there's no such thing as that. There's no sort of retrospectives or recap meetings to say, oh, this went really well, this didn't. For better or worse, I think we just figure things out more on the fly, and it's something we can discuss in our bi-weekly DevSync meetings that we now have. So in a small company, maybe containerized, maybe a local development case. I know a couple of developers where I'm at work locally, and then myself and the newest guy, we both work in a Docker environment. And I think Docker works fine, though there is additional overhead to this. Now, you are the DevOps. There is no DevOps team. You might have another developer who knows a bit more than you do, who can help you out. But generally, like I've said a few minutes ago, that if you have a problem, you've really got to try and figure it out yourself. So you have to dive into things. If they go wrong in Docker, you have to figure out what on earth's happening, learn about Docker, learn about containerization and the configuration of Docker, and figure out, why is this thing not working? And, give or take, you get to learn something, which is great, but it also slows you down from development. It can be stressful. It's quite a steep learning curve, So there's pros and cons to this. Your dev environment may be Dockerized, but it may not be running smoothly, is basically how I'd summarize that. So be prepared to figure that out. If you don't have Docker and you're running locally, well, then that's got a whole host of its own issues of installing dependencies that might not always work on every other developer's machine. Kinks are probably not ironed out in a small company when it comes to development environment. There may be a continuous integration, continuous delivery, or deployment pipeline. If there isn't, I'd strongly recommend that you vouch for setting that up or promote setting that up, because it's very helpful, very important to have a pipeline that runs a test suite when you push code up to the remote branch for a pull request, for example. It's just too risky not to. And this is another thing that I don't have covered here. But you may not have a very robust test suite in the application that you're working on. And that's a really good question to ask when you are interviewing at a company, is ask them about their test coverage, what their approach to testing is. Because it's very scary to make code changes without a robust test suite. And I would strongly, again, promote test suites in companies that don't have them. And for you, if that's on you as a developer to do that within your company, I would say definitely go for it. You need to spend time on a test suite. Really, the time that you save in not writing tests is going to cost you way more time down the road. So, gotta have tests. Okay, documentation. Yeah, what documentation? In a small company, you'll be very lucky if there's anything more than a verbose README that is not going to cover the most things. So be the one to start it. If you notice that there's areas of the documentation that would really benefit being there, then ask whether or not you have support to start it, and start it. Try and build the support. Try and get buy-in for this, because I think documentation is very useful. There is kind of the Goldilocks with documentation. It should, in my opinion, be something that does not need maintaining. So if there is a change within the application, within the code, within a system, then it doesn't need to be maintained on a weekly or even monthly basis. It should be able to stand by itself, for 6 months, 12 months or more, unless obviously you go undergo some massive changes, like introducing Docker, for example. Then you're gonna have to write new documentation for that. But generally, it should be able to stand by itself and be have a good shelf life to it as well. If it meets that criteria and it would save people time, especially new hires, then go for writing documentation. Again, the time that it takes now to write, you will save in the future. I think more so. So daily workflows in a small company, you're going to have a lot fewer meetings. A lot of your time is going to be focused on development. At least that's the case where I am. The CEO / manager / lead developer at this company, he really prioritizes developers being able to spend time developing and shielding developers from the rest of the stuff going on in the business. Okay, he takes care of that. So there's just one meeting a day that I have. It's about 15 minutes long. And then the rest of the time, a good 7 hours, chunk of 7 hours, I can spend developing. And then very, very rarely I'll have a meeting here or there with someone else in my team and maybe someone externally. But the rest of the time, it's all development time. So I can really get stuck into that flow state and write code, right? And at the end of the day, that's what I'm being paid to do. So the kind of projects I get to work on, obviously there's going to be lots of bugs to fix in any application, so a few of those. Recently implemented two-factor authentication, as well as SMS two-factor authentication, writing integrations that help with things like inventory management or shipping. So it's a whole range of stuff, front end and back end, as well as some other stuff I haven't mentioned here, more to do with DevOps and Docker, fixing issues with that. It's a whole range of stuff. I never know what I'm going to work on week to week, and it can vary quite a lot. And I find that engaging because it keeps things interesting, and I always know that I'm going to be in a learning environment. Okay, so in terms of support, when you have blockers, questions, issues, there's going to be far fewer people to go to. If you're lucky and you have a good team, they will help you get what you need. But again, like I said in the large company video that I did, you got to pray that you have a good team and good team members, people who are willing to help you out, people who are understand that you need help, and that the best way for the company, for everyone, is for them to help you. That's what you hope and pray for. If you don't have that, things will become a little more challenging. But that's where to a degree, you can rely on your own ingenuity. But there are just certain times where asking a question, a well thought out question, is going to save everyone so much more time than if you don't. So in terms of team building, like I said, I get to meet my team, the whole company every single day on a stand-up. We haven't had an on-site yet, but I think that's planned. But it is a spread out team. There's people all over the world, so I'm not sure that we'll ever all meet up at once. But I think that's pretty normal for distributed remote teams. And as far as team building goes remotely, I think we're pretty tight, close-knit. And my belief that this really kind of comes from top down. So it really depends what kind of person is leading the company. And if they are someone who values the human side of things, then I think you're going to have a better environment than someone who values, say, profit over everything else. Okay, pros and cons. These last two slides that I have for working in a smaller company. But there's lots of pros that I can think of being in a smaller company. I think you get a lot more exposure to different areas of the product. That's very interesting. It helps keep you learning and engaged, and really just builds your skill set. You get to completely own features. So oftentimes in a larger company, a large feature will get broken down into many smaller chunks of work. And you might have multiple developers working on those chunks of work. But when you're in a smaller company rather, you're going to be writing all of that code. So you get to own that entire product. or feature rather. And that's quite exciting, I think, to be able to do. And it's just nice to sort of have that sense of ownership over something that's in the application. Obviously, that's when everything's going right. When something goes wrong, you're also owning that as well. You also have a lot more say in systems and practices. So in smaller companies, there are fewer systems, fewer practices in place. But in areas where you can generate buy-in, and you've discovered areas where we might value from such systems and practices, I think you get a say in how to implement those. And I think that that's a great thing as well, because the more you have a say in how the company runs and operates, the more likely you are to enjoy your work environment as well. I think you have more growth opportunities in smaller companies. I mean, that's for obvious reasons, but the longer you're there, the more senior you become, you grow with the company, and that's all good stuff. Learning quickly, it's a kind of double-edged sword. It's great because you're learning a lot, and if you're someone who likes to learn, that's good, but it also can be stressful, and it feels sometimes at times a bit more sink and swim than it might in a larger company. But that said, if you do learn and you do well, you become a lot more valuable because you are one of the few in that company who holds a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience and expertise. And your value to the CEO essentially and to the company grows with every week, day, month that you are contributing to that company. So I think that helps to give you more negotiation power, and you're able to just carve out a lifestyle, a work-life balance that suits you the best, I think, in a smaller company. Bigger companies are more beholden to policies. Smaller companies don't have policies generally. They might have some for, the most important things. But generally there aren't all these policies like, well, you can't do this because if we do that, then everyone else will. That kind of stuff doesn't exist. You do well, you become valuable, you have bargaining power, and you're more likely to be able to negotiate, say, working, abroad for a couple months a year, or working certain hours, or pay negotiation, etc., etc. You see where I'm going here. And finally, smaller companies aren't tied down with bureaucracy, red tape. If you have an idea, you make it happen. And they also don't have fully fledged HR departments, which, yes, can suck at times when you need HR related things, but at the same time, you don't get all these HR policies coming out that they're very politically motivated. Okay, cons of working at a smaller company. I think there's going to be a lot more focus on you off the bat to be able to produce. Just because there's fewer developers and there's going to be more focus on you because you're new, and you need to. I think there's less room to hide. Not that you should be hiding, because obviously you should be able to do the work that you're being hired to do within reason, right? But I think you at least I felt I just had to produce early and quickly and show my value and that I was worth being there and that I was a good hire, a good choice. You have to solve problems yourself. I've reiterated that many times in this video. You can have a lot more autonomy that you have to wear and be able to be creative in your problem solving and bring solutions instead of problems to other people. You might have fewer perks depending on the company, though you might be able to negotiate higher pay than other companies are paying. And what I've seen in larger tech companies is that they do have policies and standards saying, well, we only pay someone at this engineering level this amount because we need to keep it fair to all the others. In smaller companies, you don't have these policies. You can negotiate your worth and get paid, based on what you think you're worth and what your boss agrees you're worth. I think there's far less tying or pegging remuneration to certain, to me, just arbitrary standards, really arbitrary standards. And in smaller companies, you're definitely going to have gremlins in the closet when it comes to technical gremlins. There's probably going to be cases where they've built features or integrations that were just sort of quick, dirty, get them working, and now they are technical debt and they're going to need fixing, and hopefully they're not too bad, but they are going to exist, no doubt, because that's just the way small companies run. there's the perception that code is always going to be written really well. I think for people who are getting into code and think coders who can write code really well, but no, there's many ways to skin a cat, and sometimes it's done really poorly. It's kind of like making a sandwich. You can make a really good sandwich, or you can make a pretty crappy sandwich. It's still a sandwich, and sometimes there are going to be some pretty crappy sandwiches out there that you will come across. But that's part and parcel of being in a small company, and I think is going to be part of your job to solve and overcome, and that's why you get paid to do what you get paid to do. Okay, that's the end for my account or experience of working in a small tech company in Canada. And if you haven't watched my account and experience of working in a large tech company in Canada, please do check the description below. The link will be there. If you found this useful, helpful, if there's anything here that you agree, disagree with, I'd really like to hear from you. Please leave me a comment on that. It lets me know that this content is useful for you. And please do consider subscribe to this video. It does help out the channel a lot. Okay, see you on the next one.